This is an industry publication of record of, I don't know, 100 years?
120, and I always add the most
It's
important
the most
industry
important.
publication
Yes.
of record.
For the sake of this interview, allow me to concur.
Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Thursday, November 6, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. On today's episode, we'll hear from actor Sean Astin in his first significant interview since being elected president of SAG-AFTRA in September. We chop it up about a bunch of subjects, from the Guild's upcoming contract talks to the tizzy over Tilly Norwood, to Bryan Cranston and Sora 2, to SAG-AFTRA's push to establish union contracts for microdramas. Astin is very sharp on the issues and clearly dedicated to serving his fellow performers. You'll get a good sense of his priorities from our conversation. That was Astin you heard at the start of this episode. He's a child of Hollywood, and it's great to know that he appreciates variety. But before we get to that interview, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Warner Brothers Discovery delivered its third quarter earnings before the bell, and it was a mixed bag. The Warner Brothers studio and HBO are humming along. Advertising sales at the linear cable networks were soft, which put a dent in the bottom line. Of course, BBD is officially now up for sale. CEO David Zaslav barely addressed that, or the Paramount bids that we know have been fielded in recent weeks. It's the typical, we can't comment on M&A speculation tap dance that happens on earnings calls when companies are in play. But the subtext of everything that Zaslav and senior executives Gunnar Weidenfels and J.B. Perrett said on the call was pretty clear. They're planning out a future that they might not be executing for much longer. ESPN has broken up with its sports gambling partner, Penn Entertainment, to set up a new deal with DraftKings. The ESPN Bet brand will be integrated into DraftKings Sportsbooks properties. I've said this before, I'd be willing to pay a couple extra bucks a month for an ESPN without all the gambling pitches. And finally, this sounds like a ton of fun. Emma Stone, Jennifer Lawrence, and Cole Escola developing a movie for Disney about Miss Piggy? Yes, please. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. Now we turn to a conversation about news and trends in showbiz with Sean Astin, president of SAG-AFTRA. Astin has been involved with the union for a long time, and it shows. He's the definition of a working actor, and you can tell how much he cares about his profession. A longer version of this interview is available as a Q&A right now on Variety.com. Please listen up here and then go read the rest online and on our social platforms. Sean Astin, thank you so much for joining me, and congratulations on being elected president of SAG-AFTRA.
Thank you very much.
So you've been active with SAG-AFTRA for a long time. You're no stranger to the organization. What's really impressed upon you as the most pressing issues right now for actors?
Well, my approach coming in was going to be to spend a month or two looking inward and really try and understand from the president's office things that you don't necessarily have access to, even if you're on the board. But to your question, it's just amazing how quickly world events and industry-wide events seem to grab a hold of my focus. Jimmy Kimmel was fired from his job.
I have to correct you a little bit. He was benched. He looked like he was in danger of getting fired.
So I suppose that's an important legal nuance, but if you're Jimmy Kimmel or anyone on that show, it sure feels like a firing when the government threatens you and then you are treated by your affiliates in a manner that is less than cordial or consistent with your contract. So in other situations like that, we haven't spoken up as much because the rationale given by the producers or the companies or whatever have been somewhat more credible. But this was a situation where the government had specifically intervened with a threat.
When you have the FCC chairman going on a podcast and making threats against Disney ABC, these are unprecedented times. Did you feel like immediately like SAG-AFTRA needs to have a voice in this?
Well, he was working under a SAG-AFTRA contract, a SAG-AFTRA set. We were very careful not to level our comments at the very beginning above the affiliates. The affiliates were ones that were making the decisions they made. So we tried to focus our comments on that. I think our union has a slightly different posture when it comes to speaking out on these issues because our people are very recognizable to the public. And so when we say things and when our organization makes public commentary, we have to make sure that our reputation can stand behind it. And it did in that scenario. The other people were out in the streets and individual members were protesting as well. But that was just the first thing. That was like the first week or something. There's been other stuff. The Tilly Norwood thing comes out. And actually, it was almost a helpful moment in articulating why there should be such strong pushback against industry and tech, because it was framed as though this artificial construct, this fictional character that would be created, was going to cause some sort of uproar in the agency business. If it's a great trope of, a young ingenue is discovered and becomes a big star and all this stuff, but it was all fake. It was all fake and it was all engineered. And so I just thought it was a fantastic opportunity to be able to see that the public was focusing its attention on this and help direct that attention from the perspective of performers who are not going to be displaced.
All about synthetic Eve is what came to mind as you
Yeah.
were talking. But the larger significance is like putting language in your contracts that this work has to be done by humans is, these are almost like Arthur C. Clarke concepts that are hard to fathom. I would imagine that a lot of the guilds work on policy and looking for the cutting edge of the next contract is imagining the impossible. A few years ago, we would have said a Tilly Norwood situation is not possible. And now it is. That's gotta be pretty daunting.
Well, it requires absolute focus to protect our workforce. It wasn't a threat in the way that it was being marketed, that agents were all of a sudden going to begin moving out of the talent representation business and into the synthetic data management business or something. But the actual technology itself, the idea of artificial intelligence and synthetic creations that are lifelike and seem real, that's an absolute threat. We've seen that coming for a long time. So I really appreciate what you said, because we are in the vanguard. We are the absolute industry leaders at helping to shape policy in this space, at least in the entertainment space.
Mhm.
Our lawyers help draft the language that's in some of these AI protection bills. And Governor Newsom came to our building, 5757 Wilshire, to sign a couple of pieces of legislation that we were influential in helping to move into law. I'm proud of it because I've seen it in action. I did a congressional roundtable with Daryl Issa downtown LA. They had one of those mobile congressional hearings. And I was the only labor representative at a table that was filled with general counsel. And it was interesting that when I was speaking about human-centered performance and the need to protect not just our name, image, and likeness, not just our right of publicity, but like our very dignity, our humanness, these lawyers who are very skilled people like keeping a poker face, they were nodding yes. There is a lot of overlap in what it means to protect our information, our data, their libraries, our identities.
Can I press you for any specifics? Because, of course, next year you are gonna go into another contract situation. Any specifics in terms of what you've learned in the last couple of years about where more teeth needs to put
Yeah,
into
data tracking,
legislation?
data tracking, data tracking. There's
That's
all
the new frontier.
I mean, listen, I'm just one person, and my role as president is to help guide a team to a great conclusion about whatever proposal packet we want to bring across. But I'll be in the room arguing very, vigorously. You used to hear about watermarking, you hear about blockchain technology. The basic premise of what I want to see as a layperson is that when things are ingested into their large models, they can't track them. That's a lie. They lied about it before. If they lie about it again, we're going to call them on that lie. I don't generally like calling people a liar, but we absolutely know now that data can be tracked. They may not want it to be tracked because once they realize on the other side, when a digital creator is put together, they may realize that there are a number of, I don't even know how many performers' work that has been ingested and spit out. That just seems to me like the lowest hanging fruit in terms of conceptually what we want to be able to do. But I am not the expert in knowing how we're going to attack the AI argument. What I do know is that I'm going to help manage a team of experts so that when we get to that moment, there shouldn't be any surprise. When we walk into that room, everybody should know exactly what's at stake. And I hope that we can work together to design an agreement, because we all know what's needed is policy, is law.
Fundamentally, this is a copyright-based business. Fundamentally, the studios and the artists should be aligned on whatever it takes to protect the efficacy of our copyright. But as always, the devil is in the details.
We had one of our members, Bryan Cranston.
I was just about to ask you about the Sora 2 situation. Can you give me a little backstory about how that came together and how Bryan happened to be the push that you made for them to make the adjustments that they did?
So we did not invent this moment, but we are living in it. And when the Tilly Norwood thing happened and we saw the pushback, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, our national executive director and chief negotiator, and I penned a letter to our members. And it took a lot of time, but we felt that it was important to really invest the right kind of time and energy to compose a communication that level set to our members where their leadership sees this moment. And it got a wonderful response. Members really seemed to appreciate the time we took and what we said, that the positions we laid out. I'm sure some would feel that it didn't go far enough, but the response was really wonderful. I had just made a movie with Bryan Cranston in the summer called Chili Finger with John Goodman and he and Judy Greer and myself, and we just had a great time. It's a great cast. It's going to be a great little movie. But he called me or sent me a text or something like that right after he read that. And he said, that letter is incredible, Sean. That's really, really great. Thank you so much for writing it. It gives me so much comfort. And I said, oh, thanks, man. How are you? His next email came back saying, I just got contacted by a reporter because Walter White, his famous character from Breaking Bad, appeared on a street corner with Michael Jackson in some amusing way. Oh, he put the link in there and I looked at it and I thought, wow. He said, I don't want to answer the questions until I've talked to my union and I know that whatever our approach is, that I'm working in concert with what the union's approach is, which to me, was absolutely, it makes me want to cry, because for someone of his level of success and familiarity with the public, his voice carries very far. For his first instinct to be check with the union, I just thought, man, I hope that a lot of the other union members that we have think about that. So we were ready to fight. But then our policy making team, Jeffrey Bennett and others, said, well, actually, OpenAI has said that they're going to change their opt out to opt in. And the opt out thing is the most ludicrous piece of garbage I had ever heard in my life. This is where if you somehow happen to find somewhere in the ether that your likeness has been used, you can try and find a phone number for somebody at whatever company is using it and see if, would you please mind not using my image? And that just seemed criminal to me. So, but apparently Sam Altman and OpenAI had said previously that they were going to change that to an opt-in process, which is like they won't use it unless they've asked you and you've agreed to use it, which essentially is what we have in our contract right now. You just have to notify us and get our permission and pay us. Right after the Tilly Norwood thing happened with the Sora stuff. And but at this moment, they were really indicating to us that they wanted to cooperate. And it just became clear to me that it's in their interest to cooperate with us. So I feel like that's their relationship to the public and their customers, I think, was something that was also in their mind. But they were willing to support our no fakes legislation. I mean, the whole industry, and not just like SAG-AFTRA, but everybody is trying to get this No Fakes Act through. I said, well, let's do a joint statement then. And everybody got excited about it. And it was like, great. I don't want to over praise the moment, But the fact that they took it down, said they didn't want to do that in the future, and would support the AI safety legislation we were pursuing, that seemed like a good way to find collaboration with them. And I hope there's a lot more of that in the future.
SAG-AFTRA was very early to come out with a low-budget vertical content contract. Variety's been writing about microdramas right and left, definitely big overseas. It seemed like it was important for the Guild to get out there and say, we're recognizing this activity is happening. Do you have a sense that it will be significant for your members?
Personally, I do. I think the issue is in doubt whether it will in fact scale in this country the way it did in China. But our members were working in this space, and it was really important for us to create the same safety mechanisms for them that people have working elsewhere, because it's professional work. It was not an easy thing to organize the verticals space. It's a promulgated contract, which means that it's a one-off. So if, as I sense might happen, and we see lots of evidence of this every day, the larger companies decide to get into the game, we have the right to adjust upward any of the terms and conditions that we are offering.
Sean, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and we'll certainly be talking.
Thank you, Cynthia. Be well.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. My colleague Ethan Schanfeld will do an onstage Q&A with Jim Gaffigan on Sunday, November 9th, as part of the New York Comedy Festival. Gaffigan is receiving the Comedy Vanguard Award from Variety. Look for the video next week on Variety.com. On Saturday, November 8th, there will be a memorial service held for Bob Broder, the longtime agent and Chuck Lorre Productions executive. It'll be held on the Warner Brothers lot, as it should be. Next week, Variety will be all about the American film market, which opens Tuesday in Los Angeles. We'll be hearing on Daily Variety from Elsa Kaslasi, our terrific international editor, who is coming in from Paris, as usual, to cover the market. Before we go, congrats to Christian Ostling. He's been promoted at YouTube to VP of Subscription Products, reporting to CEO Neil Mohan. He joined YouTube in 2015 from Twitter. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton. Sticks, nicks, hick, picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in Monday for another episode of Daily Variety.